And this is pronounced then in verse 15, where God says that there will be enmity, conflict. Now pay close attention to the wording there. Between the woman and the serpent, and between her offspring and his. Okay? So you have the individual woman and the individual serpent, and there's going to be conflict between them, yeah? And you have the offspring of the woman and the offspring of the serpent, and there's going to be conflict between them. That's what God says, right? Now this is the entire story of the Bible flows out of this. The entire narrative of the scriptures can be seen as a conflict between the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman. That is the people of God. So when you go to read the Old Testament and you start to think, okay, so like, is this talking about battles, like literal battles between like Eve's children and snakes? No. It's saying that there are going to be people who follow the serpent, who are spiritually his offspring, and people who are the woman's offspring, and they will not get along. And then as you read the Old Testament, you're like, well, who are those people? Who are the offspring? Who is the seed of the woman, and who is the seed of the serpent? And you might think, shallowly, that what ends up happening is that, well, the seed of the woman is, say, something like Israel in the Old Testament. And the seed of the serpent is all of the other nations. Of course, the problem with that is that most of the people of Israel hated God. Like, read your Old Testament carefully, and you think, this is the story of faithful Israel. It's not the story of faithful Israel. When you read the Old Testament is largely a minority report on the faithful in Israel. At any given time in Israel, there are the prophets or the righteous, and they are always being killed and oppressed by the wicked, who are also Israelites. So it's not as clean as, even within Israel, the covenant people of God, there seem to be some people who are the offspring of the serpent, yes? And there are other people who are offspring of the woman. You see this finally in Jesus' proclamation against the Pharisees in his own day. And what does Jesus call the Jewish religious leaders in his own day? Anybody know? Vipers. Offspring of serpents. Now, why is he saying that? He's going back to Genesis chapter 3. He's saying, you all fancy yourself as being against the side of the serpent. You're playing for his team. You are his children. So this conflict, God says, there's going to be conflict between the woman and the serpent, between her offspring and his offspring. But this is not drawn on ethnic lines. It's drawn on spiritual lines. The first casualty in this conflict will be one of Eve's sons. And her other son will be the offspring of the serpent that kills him. Do you see this statement from God? As a result of what's gone on in the garden and their distrust of God and rebellion against him, there's going to be war. And that war, the first battle of that war, is between Cain and Abel. And Cain kills him.